Hey y'all, it's Stephie and welcome back to my channel. Happy New Year. I hope you guys had a really good holiday season and also a fun but safe New Year's. So today I'm going to be doing another video as part of my Work with Stephie series where I share tips, tricks, and advice as if we were working together. This is what I would do if we were co-workers, just some practical on-the-job tips that will hopefully be helpful for you guys in the new year. So today I wanted to share some tips on how to read a 10K or annual report of a public company. I'm thinking back to when I first started in public accounting. I'm not in public accounting anymore, just in case you're newer to my channel. I am an internal audit manager now. I'm in industry, but I was in public accounting and was a manager there before I left to go into industry a few years ago. And anyways, going back to the beginning years of my career, I remember my seniors telling me, okay, go read their 10K so you can get familiar with this client. And you're kind of like, okay. So you just start reading through it and you don't really know what to focus on. Certain areas that I think would be most beneficial for you guys to read if you don't read everything. So I think this would be helpful for people who are new to public accounting or to accounting. If you're new to a particular company or new to a specific client, things like that, as well as obviously the actual accounting and financial information. But for me, that's what I would focus on. So I'll share some of those sections with you guys. Lastly, this is really helpful as well if you work for a private company and you're helping to put together their report, a private company's report and footnotes, or maybe you're in public accounting and you are helping one of your private clients, draft their financial statements. What I would do whenever I was looking for examples of like footnote disclosures for my private companies. So we're gonna go into all of that here in just a few seconds. I wanted to lay out the groundwork for that, who this video would apply to. This is not a how to read an annual report for an investor. So without further ado, let's jump right into the video.
The way I like to look up public companies' financial information is through the SEC website. So you can type into Google or whatever search engine you like to use, Edgar SEC. So Edgar is where they file all of their electronic reports and forms. So I'm going to bring you guys to the beginning page. So there's a few things that could be helpful for you guys. We're going to go straight here to search for company filings. But if you wanted to look at the different forms, if you see a bunch of forms listed there and you're not sure what they are, there's some information here as well that you can look at. So we're going to go into search for company filings. And then you can search by different things. I always search by the company name or their ticker symbol. So the ticker is what they are like listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Like for example, Apple is AAPL. So today I'm going to be using the Children's Place to go through with you guys. I have no affiliations with the Children's Place. I've never audited them before. I don't work with them at all. Only reason I picked them is because I Googled, small publicly traded companies in 2020 and they were one of them. And so anyways, I read through their financials and I thought it was pretty interesting. So we're going to just use them as an example. So you enter in either the ticker or you could put in the company name. So let me go back and we're going to put in, I hate it when it does that, Children's. See, and it'll start listing a whole bunch of different companies that are listed. So anyways, we're going to pick Children's Place. Before we jump into the actual annual report itself, I quickly wanted to point out some of the typical filings that you'll see, especially when you're working in public accounting, most familiar with, that you guys will be either downloading or looking at or tying out at some point in time during the audit. It's not comprehensive, but for the purpose of this video and just to keep it more for like my, newer auditors. So the 10Q is a quarterly report, file quarterly financials, and this is unaudited, but external audit firms will do a review. So they look at the numbers that are listed in here for reasonableness, that it ties back to some kind of evidence, but they're not doing actual audit work at that point in time. They may do some audit work which will help them with their year-end audit, but the requirements for filing a 10Q is a lot less than when you're doing a 10K. An 8K is the company sharing some public information. Is like an announcement from the company. So it could be something like entering into a new debt agreement, appointing a new director to the board of directors, or some executive leaving the company, joining the company. It's just different announcements of material transactions that occur throughout the year. Here you'll see that their fiscal year end is February 1st, which is pretty interesting. So they're not done with 2020 results because they have until February 1st for their fiscal year end. So that's why you don't see a 10K here for this past year. But for 2 years ago, here's their 10K. So we'll go into that in just a second. This is their annual report. That is the financial statements and footnotes are audited by external auditors. And we'll talk more about that here in a second. The last thing I wanted to point out is this form, DEF 14A. So this is a proxy statement, information that they are going to be presenting to their stockholders at their stockholders meeting. So it could be things like compensation for executives, like proposed compensation, and just different things that they need shareholders to vote on. We're going to actually go into an annual report. So just as a disclaimer, this is more areas that I suggest focusing on. Of course, if you have the time and the brain power to read the entire thing and comprehend it all, in one fell swoop, good for you, and go for that. But this is more to help my new hires, people who are new to engagement teams, what to focus on when you are looking through a 10K that would be most beneficial to give you a lot of information for your audit client. So I'm not going to walk you through every single section, but I will show you guys, focus areas that I think would be most helpful. You have the table of contents here. Primarily, we're going to be looking at business and risk factors. I think those are really helpful. Also, we'll be looking at the MD&A, which is management's discussion and analysis. For clarification, this entire report is not audited per se by an external auditor. The external auditor audits the information that is here in item A, financial statements and supplementary data. So those information have been audited. Now, whenever the auditor is reviewing this report before it is made public, they do go and make sure that if some financial information is included here or in other sections, that they agree or match back to what was audited. So for example, an auditor, if they said revenue was $10 million, they're going to make sure that it says $10 million when it's shown here versus saying $50 million. The first area that I think is really helpful to get a good understanding of a client is this section here, item 1, business, where it's going to be talking about what the company is, what they do, how they make their money, what kind of costs they have. So you can see there's a lot of good information as you go down these sections. It'll talk about acquisitions of other companies that they've had in the past, however many years. So I definitely would recommend reading through this, and this will give you a really good understanding of their business. And of course, you'll learn more as you are on the client. Okay, next section is risk factors. This section I like to read through, especially since I focus now more on risk and controls. I'm an internal audit, and that's risk and compliance, and SOX is what I focus on now. So for me, if I am ever going on a job interview, I go and I look at the risk factors, and that gives me an idea of different controls or potential areas that they would need, focus on. There are some things that are a bit more general. I think a lot of companies have similar types of risk factors. So things like market price of common stock, that's very normal for most companies. Not executing on their business strategies. Cybersecurity is a really big hot topic in the past several years. So, for my college students who are still out there, I still think accounting and audit is going to be around for quite a bit. Maybe automation will happen, more of the basic, detailed, transactional type of information, but I still think that there's going to be a need for a questioning mind. So auditors or people who are looking at transactions at a high level or looking at exceptions. So anyways, I say that because I think if you're in college and you're in accounting, then if you could and felt like it, I would suggest minoring in something to do with IT, something to do with cybersecurity, or something in the IT space, because I definitely think that plus accounting is a good combination for what's coming for the future. But anyways, that is a very common risk factor. It's very helpful to know what are the risks that this company is trying to mitigate and whatnot. What's pretty interesting too is I think they started talking about COVID at this point because, it had just started last year, and so that's when they were doing the report. So it's just interesting to see that. Something that could be interesting to look at are the legal proceedings. This is, a big piece of an external audit, getting confirmations from lawyers. This next part, I kind of skip over. I don't think it's as beneficial if you're a brand new, staff, or you're brand new to an audit engagement. So I wouldn't focus on that necessarily. Okay, selected financial data. This too, I would probably skip over or not spend too much time on because we'll go into more detail about things in the financial statements and footnotes. So this is more just like taking pieces of that and summarizing it for investors to look at. So now we go into the MD&A section, good area to get more information about a company. So it talks about the business again. Some of this is summarizing what we've already seen up above. What I think is very helpful in their MD&A section is their critical accounting policies, what they're adopting that current year, like hedges and accounting for leases, what they'll be adopting later on. Now, this section down here, I think it is helpful to read through just to see, the movement of certain financial line items from year to year. This is really helpful information as well, but I know when you're first starting out, this can be kind of information overload, so I wouldn't get too bogged down into reading all of this information. Keep this section in mind, these comparisons from year to year, because during an audit, typically you'll be doing things called flux analysis, so variances from a period of time to another period of time. It's more like an analytic, saying why did these particular line items move from one year to another, and this can be a really good resource to start from. They also do have this information in the 10Q as well. So again, if you are newer to an engagement team, you're coming in during the year-end audit, you can look at the 10Qs, the quarterly reports, and you can see what the fluctuations were. So that can give you a starting point, and then of course you have to get more details about it. But just keep that in mind. I don't think you need to necessarily read through it word for word right now, but just something to keep in mind for later on. This section, I personally just kind of glance over. I don't focus on it too much, and we'll talk more about why that is later on when we go into the financial statements and footnotes here in a second. This can be helpful if you're going to be doing the controls audit for a company or for a client. This is pretty good information to read as well, just to see, has there been any issues with their controls, like material weaknesses. So it's nice to see what the opinion was from previous years too. That's especially helpful if you are on a newer client. Maybe you guys got them from another accounting firm. For this one, you'll see that they actually switched auditors. Their current auditor is EY, and their previous auditor was BDO. So they had both of those opinions in their report because they're showing the year that BDO also audited them. We are in the actual financial statements and footnotes report. So this is audited. What your final product is. This is where I do focus on. I do like to look at, the movement that they had from year to year, kind of seeing what balances are bigger than others, looking to see what their assets are compared to their liabilities. Just also interesting just to look at the different types of expenses that they have. One thing that I will note, well, because they haven't done a 2020 report yet, what you will notice in a lot of companies for 2020, there will be some pretty big restructuring costs. Obviously, we all know COVID and whatnot has affected our economy in a major way. So many people have lost their jobs. So you will see a lot of restructuring costs for the 2020 year-end audits. So that would be something I would focus on if I was like looking for a new job and I was interested in a company, just kind of seeing what the restructuring cost was and what that all entailed. A lot of us, I know, if you are looking for a new job, you want to make sure that your next move, you're not going to be cut immediately if things don't turn around. Just keep that in mind. That's another cost that I would probably keep an eye out for. But just good to kind of see how they've been trending year to year. Looks like they were down compared to the prior year before that. Just kind of interesting to look at. Here's their equity, and then you can look at like their different cash flows. It's interesting to look at, but don't get too worried about the details of this because you'll be getting a lot more information about, these balances whenever you do your actual audit. But it's just pretty interesting just to see kind of trends. So then we go into the actual footnotes themselves. One of them that I would suggest, reading through is the first footnote. It will kind of summarize what you've already read, but also from just kind of a different perspective too. This would be a really good area for y'all to read through, I think. If you're one of my tax folk that are watching, hi, I love my tax folk too. It would be, I think, helpful for you guys to read through like certain sections like income taxes. And then there is a tax footnote as well. That I think would be helpful to read through. Another one that would be helpful to look at, I think, is revenues. That's always a big ticket item for every company. So just kind of understanding their revenue recognition policy and all that. So they go into a lot more detail now, and with the requirement of 606, there's just a lot more information on revenues compared to previous years before 606. And so at this point, I think those are the main ones that I think generally would be helpful to look at in terms of footnotes. And we'll go into more sections here in just a second. But what I did want to tell you guys is, don't get too overwhelmed with reading every single footnote that's in this report. If you can, skim through it or read through it just to get an understanding. But especially if you're brand new, it's going to be information overload and may just be, too much. And I don't want you guys to get like overwhelmed with things. Glance through them, but don't feel like you need to memorize everything about them. You can always come back and refer back to this information. What I will say is whenever you start doing your audits and you are assigned sections, definitely come back to the footnotes and then read through it again in a new unit of time once you've looked at the work papers that you're going to be looking at, you've looked at prior years, so you kind of understand how things are, how it was audited, how they got to their conclusions, and then tying it back into their actual footnotes. I think that at that point it's a lot better to look at the footnotes because then you can get more detailed information because you're focusing on that particular section. So for example, if you are assigned credit facility, so debt, at this point I think it's more beneficial to look at it and read it more really in depth and everything at a more detailed level versus doing it at the onset of the audit. Of course, like I said, you can, it's definitely acceptable, but just in terms of what would be most bang for your buck to get an understanding of the client, we've gone through those sections. I did want to mention for those of you guys who are, maybe you work for a private company or you are auditing a private company and you're helping them draft their financials. This is a great resource if you're needing examples, like you're creating footnotes for the first time, brand new. For example, I had a real estate client that was private and I was helping draft their financials. I would go and look at different public real estate companies on the SEC website and just see how their footnotes were structured. So for example, if I was looking for leases, a lease's footnote, I would see how it was kind of structured, what kind of information they were putting in there, and of course looking at my firm's guidance as well. But sometimes it's nice to see a actual live example. Definitely make use of this public information to see formatting and what kind of information is shared. So here, like I said, for my tax folk, they have a huge footnote about income taxes, and typically the tax team will be the ones to tie this out because they did the work for the most part. But anyways, if you are new to the engagement and you are on the tax side, this could be helpful for you to read through as well. And I guess the other thing that I thought was kind of fun and interesting, certain information that has to be publicly shared. So things like compensation for executives, and then also the accounting fees. So for example, the accounting fees for EY or for BDO, since they were the auditors of this company. So if you click on that, you'll see it talks about they are set forth in the proxy statement of the annual meeting, and that's what they all say. So if you see that, that is the Def 14A that I shared with you guys earlier. So in case you're curious and you ever want to look at it yourself. So you'll see here's the 10K that they filed, and then it'll be the proxy statement right after that. So there it is here. And then you could do a quick find for executive comp. It's kind of, it's a little, it's interesting. You know what I liked when I was looking at this particular company? There are 1, 2, 3 women in executive positions for this company. So I thought that was pretty cool. Anyways, so yeah, you can see what they make, CEO, CFO, salary is that much, bonuses, stock awards, I mean, damn. Yeah, so you can see what their total comp is. Isn't that fun? So yeah.
All right, y'all, so that is how I would go and read through a 10K or annual report. Hopefully it was helpful, and hopefully it gave you kind of ideas on what to focus on when you're reading through an annual report of a public company. If the video was helpful, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, that would help get this content out to people who are looking for this specific topic, so it's helpful for other people in our community as well. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing and being part of our Stephie fam, because we would love to have you. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay positive, and I'll talk to y'all in my next video. All right. Okay. Hey, y'all. Oh, seriously? Okay. Here we go. Another install. So we're gonna be doing, nope, okay. And one of the things, I'm gonna sneeze, or, anyways, yeah, okay. Okay, so yeah, so that is, okay.
And stuff like that. Okay, so anyways, so